Hi there, my name is Troels. Welcome to Soundpaint. Welcome to our new Spice Drums. Spice Drums is the first out of many in our new Spice series, which is really a continuation of our very popular Dunescape library for Soundpaint. Our Spice series is really about exploring all the most contemporary scoring trends, for example what we've seen in like True Detective or what we've seen in like Hans Zimmer's beautiful Dune scores, particularly Dune 2, and sort of taking those concepts and embracing them and then running away, inspired into the forest and try to create completely new things out of it. So in a way, it's an homage and respect to all the great masters of right now. And in another way, is also our way of, again, trying to push the game forward. I'm thinking a lot about like, what new methods do I need to deploy to force that inspiration, if you will? Creating restrictions around the creative flow actually yields the best results. So for Spice Drums, I created one limitation, and that was that we couldn't use any acoustic sources, but I wanted the library to sound acoustic. When you can't do anything acoustically, you have to go synthetically, meaning that we are now limited to synthesizers. But I wanted the synthesizers to sound acoustic, I wanted them to sound real, and built these new style epic percussion instruments in all their beautiful velocity layers and round robin stuff we normally do for acoustic samples, but specifically done with synthesizers. We sort of jokingly say with this library, which is over 9,300 samples, that it actually broke a CPU for every single sample we created. So imagine like stacking over 1,000 synthesizers, in this case 1,800 oscillators, and put them in these crazy arrays, put some of the best effects chain in. I think we had a chain with over like 50 different effects to create these sounds. And combined, you will break the computer just generating one sample. We created everything from like the smallest like alien like metallic little like tonal drums up to like epic scale percussion ensembles, but all generated with the computer. We then resampled everything so it runs butter smoothly at very low CPU consumption in Soundpaint. I almost want to say this is a post-epic library. I think we're a little bit done with epic music in its traditional sense. Also epic percussion. Do we really need more traditional percussion ensembles? Probably not. But do we need something like this? You be the judge. Spice Drums is comprised of 5 main beefy categories of sounds, instruments, and ensembles as well. Beginning here with beats. We also have booms, but they're nothing like I've ever heard them before. These are just pristinely one step ahead. We got hits, but hits is not just hits in a traditional way, it's also individual instruments, whether they're singular percussion instruments or whether they're beefy ensemble instruments, alien percussive ensembles. We have giant, otherworldly metallics, both going from massive, beefy anvil ensembles to tiny, tiny sort of alien percussions. And then we got a handful of sweepers as well. One of the magical things about spice drums is that one given instrument was actually sampled across all the octaves of the keyboard here. So for example, if we just take something like a boomer here, you'll notice that it has a lot of different characters going up and down. It's not just like that it's super short in the top. These were sampled individually per key, so don't just look at them as one part here. It's actually a whole suite of ensembles for every part. All that little noise. And most of these giant instrument ensembles inside of Soundpaint were both velocity sampled and round robin sampled. Velocities in Soundpaint means that we're morphing the sound. So I have 127 different variations of it and then nearly infinite round robin. So up here, this is going to sound like a mini tabla. And down here, almost like a tabla ensemble. And then down here, probably more like toms. And down here, bass drummy toms. But if you notice that the timing is the same, more or less. So in essence, that means that the ensemble is playing at the same speed because we're treating them as many ensembles in one here. Mini tablas, normal tablas, toms, bass drums, and then whatever this is. And super soft. And we programmed it in a way so when you hit harder, you'll get all those sort of natural detunings that happens when you hit a snare or any percussion instrument harder. The skin gets tighter, the pitch gets pushed upwards, but also sometimes create like imprecisions, both in the body of the drum combined with the skin and everything else going on. So we are emulating that with synthesizers. Just a free percussive improvisation, just letting the library seduce me and bring me into a place I haven't been before. I also have a few other libraries, predominantly Terrie is a vocal library for Soundpaint that I threw in there as well. There's also some shakers coming from actual rattlesnakes that we sample as well. But let's just take the demo from the start here, beginning with Terrie. I took her voice and played it both forwards and then the same part here, but played that backwards, and then I used a little bit of morphing in between the two. It just created this sort of unique effect, almost like she's breathing while talking. And underneath the vocals, I took an Amazon forest and then I gradually put a gate on it. You may not have noticed this, but the Amazon forest sort of gets more rhythmic as we get into it here. Try to look what's going on here, particularly on the gate, as I gradually mix it in. To me, there's music in everything, so when I hear the Amazon forest, it's not necessarily just sustained insects, they can also become rhythms, and I love that they were so high-pitched, that sort of cricket, insecty kind of vibe on top. And the first little sprinkle signs of spice drums happens with this sort of thunderous sound. When we created spice drums, a lot of them are using very unique filtering in the lower velocities, and because we're morphing, it's so expressive what we can do with one patch, especially because we got 7 octaves worth of percussion instruments on every single patch. So down here, we get this very sort of thunder-like sound. And if I play it a little bit harder, notice what happens. And harder. We're bringing forth different characteristics in the sound. Now, if we go 3 octaves higher, we can do the same, like super soft. Play a little bit harder. Sounds almost like a rototomy kind of ensemble. So, just like an acoustic instrument, we can express ourselves through the velocities. Fascinating. I love that little like that happens down here. And again, we can play that up here as well. So cool. Down here. So sweet. I love the clarity and the beefiness of this boom here. I know, I said in the beginning that how many booms do we really need? And I stand by that statement. But if we listen to these booms individually, as a boom connoisseur, you may appreciate just the level of clarity, power, depth, how many layers that are intricately layered to create this boomer here. It's just a more refined sound. Like up here, that doesn't sound like a boomer. but a very snappy snare. Kind of more rocky. And now getting down to like tom-tom territory. Now we're at the boomer level, but you hear all that sort of like crispy, crittery kind of noise. That's what makes it sexy in my opinion. And also velocity based, played super soft. A little bit harder. Gets a little more pronounced and super hard. And that's just one boomer, but it's so much more than a boomer. You can go like... Is that a boomer or is that a whole ensemble of booming things? Like, I'm using the boomers here as a snare drum, so it goes like... And even just standalone, it's so pretty. The clarity in the depths. Normally with bass drums, they sort of tend to fizzle out once you go too bassy on them, but we're preserving the bass frequencies here because this is all generated with synthesizers, and we really spent a long time on making sure that they were play as real instruments across all the different octaves here. So even when you're in subwoofer region, you still get like a very clear presence in the sound. So 4 octaves worth of something that sounds kind of like rototoms. It's like I have my ultimate like rototom steroid ensemble that I always wanted just at my fingertips here. It's so much fun to play too. And notice how it gets almost like noisy down here, not even tonal, more like kind of like thunder work that's been manipulated. And I click it a little bit harder. So sweet. And the thunder down here. And we bring forth those tonal qualities when we hit it harder. Highs here, soft, kind of more noisy, a little bit harder. And now the rototom ensemble sort of bleeds through. I also want to say with this library here, it's not necessarily designed to just be used in 4/4 sort of normal epic style percussion. As we go deeper into this walkthrough here, I'm playing more around with time, sort of just letting loose and using the ensembles here as if they were acoustic phrases almost. And then there's this beautiful Brahms versus elephant kind of sound. It's coming from our free ASMR library, which is free in Soundpaint. This is a particular patch I made inspired by the great and late Johan Johansson's soundtrack for Arrival in particular, and Sicario as well. I just love this part here. There's these sort of gradual rolls. And you can hear I'm using it a little bit loosely. All of a sudden it goes a little bit higher and it's a little bit off. In context, it sounds like... We have our sweeps as well. These were also carefully designed using hundreds of oscillators in terms of having noise sweeps laying over each other, really creating some beautiful sweeping effects. So for example, this sweeper here, we'll notice that it has the same length across all the octaves here, which is so useful because I can play it in the highs here, which is like a little sandstorm, very quick. An octave deeper. Deeper. I'm also playing this super cute little, like, I sort of imagine just some weird kind of metallic contraption that you can play with, but in a more alien-like form. Sound like this. Now, it's little up here, but an octave deeper, it's almost more like a very, very tight tom. An octave deeper. I mean, to me, that sounds completely like a tom. And deeper. Did you hear that little like squeak? I love sometimes just to put in like a singular sound, just giving a little bit like, whoa, what's going on here? It's just Terrie making this little kind of squeak. That sound, so cool. Now, try to listen with it and without it. Let's listen with it first. And then let's remove it. And this part here is perhaps the best way of exemplifying the power that we have all these octaves worth of instruments on every single part here. Let me just play this standalone here so you can hear how powerful it is. Sometimes when I do a roll, I'll just be like on the keyboard here. You'll notice that in this part of the sequence. Now that sound, that little rattle here, actually came from a rattlesnake. Tonya and I recorded a bunch of rattlesnakes a couple of years ago in building up to Soundpaint. This is a part of our beautiful noises library, particularly our rattlesnake patch here. We deep sampled real rattlesnakes and I put a filter on them, sort of sweep the filter up and down as the ensembles were playing here. Now to me, this is the part of the demo where I unfolded the most. And I did take the liberty of adding a few acoustic cymbals on top of it. I don't know why, but I just wanted to see what happened when we had the juxtaposition of spice drums versus something real as well. So some of those sort of scraping things is coming from our Cymbal Effects library inside of Soundpaint. I'm also playing a little bit around with our sweepers and using the cutoff on them as well to cut off some of the initial sweeps. I don't know why I went all EDM on this ending here, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. For example, here's a sweeper where I'm using offset to cut off the initial part of the sweep and then just playing it almost like a sort of chanting crowd of people, like woo, woo. And then we got these beefy, massive percussion ensembles underneath. And as you can see in the sequence, those kind of rolls is just me going like. And I play them super loosely. It just has to feel right. It doesn't need to be theoretically right. And it makes a difference in the music when all your components are that loose. On this guy here, I just took a boomer and I assigned it the time module to it here. But when I move my mod wheel, time gets slower and slower, so the boomer goes from being super fast to being nearly time frozen. And Terrie sort of wraps it up. There are thousands of samples in the Terrie library. It's one of our beautiful gems. There's so much life and expression in this library. And even if Terrie's clipping a little bit, even if some of these spice drums are kind of wild and out there, it's so important. If you go back ever and listen to the stems of some of your favorite musicians, particularly when they recorded in the 70s up to the 90s, we'll notice that there's a lot of natural imperfections. In a lot of the vocal recordings, there will sometimes be clipping and all that stuff. It just sort of happens in real life. Like spice drums is kind of like cyborging for samples, if you will. We're creating synthetic new life. This is the ex machina of sample libraries, if you will. So welcome to our Spice series. Spice drums is the first out of many. We have vocals, we have other new style instruments coming in the series as well. This is just the first out of many.